folks, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jay Hart. We're going to take a little break from the 32 Roadster to drop this rear crossmember for a 1940 convertible. And this crossmember is found in, this style of crossmember is found from 35 to 40, something like that. 41 maybe even, I'm not really sure. But I know it's in quite a bit of them, and this is a common project for a lot of people who want to lower their cars. So in doing so, there's a lot of geometry and a lot of math. There's guys that'll just like butcher into their car and just like push down on something, push up on something, and you end up moving a lot of things around. But there's a lot of geometry that really needs to stay the same even though you're lowering it. This angle here where your spring sets, this is sitting at a different angle than where it actually mounts to your frame. Of course, we have this upside down and have the front of it facing forward here, but the idea is to drop this section down. And what we need to do is move this down about 1.5 inches for this particular project. So you have to figure out, and the key to this, everybody probably knows, you're going to cut a section out of this area, and you're going to cut a section out of this area. What you would say the section out of the top of the crossmember. Again, we've got this upside down, and you're going to take a section out of the bottom in this area. So the top gets cut here, and the bottom gets cut here and here. And that's going to allow enough space in between these areas and space down here for this whole thing to lever down. So it's all going to be able to push down. It'll close up these gaps and it'll close up these gaps. But you got to figure out where those gaps go. And a common problem is that you end up in an area where you're putting in way too much weld. This is supporting the weight of your car. So you want to make sure this is a good, strong piece. And the reason the factory made it the way they did is because it's triangulated. This area is trying to push itself through this area here. And all you've got are these flimsy frame rails out here keeping it from where it's going. And if you're not careful, if you don't make these cuts right and you don't drop this thing right, you're putting a lot of force on your crossmember. And what's going to happen is you're going to end up spreading your frame rails out, and then your body's not going to fit. So you really got to slow down and think about what you're doing. Now, I have bolted this to my table, just drilled and tapped a couple of holes, and I got this bolted down. You could use a big piece of I-beam or a channel or something of that nature just to get it solid and in place. Now, I know that I want to drop it about 1.5 inches, about 1.5 inches actually, something like that. So I've created these blocks that I'm able to make these pieces where we've got these cut at the angle. We got these cut at the perfect angle of this surface right here, of the top of the spring surface here. We've got these cut at that angle, and I'm going to be able to tack these in place. And then I've added another piece of material. It's just channel, and I've just got 3 pieces here. That's all this is. Just 3 pieces of channel. And I know that when it's all set up the way I need it to be, all square, then I'm going to be able to remove a piece of it, you know, and take your time in making your spacers. Make sure that you have everything, you know, squared up and aligned properly. It's a lot easier when you do. Is it absolutely necessary? No, you can fumble around and move this back in place, but if you start with a bunch of square pieces, it'll certainly help. So I'm going to be able to tack these angled pieces in place on this top section and go ahead and tack them to this piece, because the drop we need is the thickness of this channel right here. So once this is all tacked in place to this piece, I can remove this bottom, and that'll bring this section down. That'll tell me that I'm in the place I want to be. I'm at the angle that I want to be at when this is sitting flush on the table. And I've transferred all these marks to the table. So just using, you know, some common stuff. And I try to show you guys stuff that you can, I mean, about everybody has some sort of square like this, you know, a carpenter square. About everybody has this. And you can use it a lot for things, you know, just touching off here at the top. If you'll see, that's how I got all of my marks, to make sure that I'm cutting squarely on all these cuts on the inside. You can see I already have all of this marked. And it's because after things were bolted down, this was leveled up. Everything's leveled up with my table. You know, I've got everything leveled up with the table. So I know that I'm all level there. everything's true. And so I can come in here after I've decided where, and I'm going to make my cuts right in the radius of this change of this angle here. That's where I'm making my cut. So I've just transferred everything down on the table. This hole here, to find the square hole and know exactly where it should be sitting, this is something pretty common, just a piece of just angle. You can take this angle, grab your level. Surely everybody has a level. I mean, if you're building a hot rod, a lot of people build hot rods. They don't have big machine shops. They don't have a lot of fancy tools. But if you're building a hot rod, you at least ought to have maybe a level. Maybe a level. A level would be good. So I've come down here with the level, and I just took this piece of angle and I put it in all four corners. And that's exactly how I transfer that hole down to the table. This square hole. It's just by turning this and hitting every corner and doing it several times and just making sure that you've got it, you know, where it goes here. So then you know where you started from. I think it's really important to record where you started from. So so I told you I made the cuts here because we're right here on this angle, and there are guys who will make a cut way out here on the edge. You know, they think they want to get this cut way out here. Well, there's a reason why this cutout is here. This is here for an exhaust, and the other side is here for an exhaust. Now, even though, you know, stock had one exhaust coming back, they did ship these things overseas, and they had a different exhaust on different sides for different purposes, or different countries maybe. But so you've got two of these on both sides, and it's nice to keep those things there. So for me, I wanted to come outside of those and leave that there. And I know for this particular build, it's got dual exhaust. It's going to come back through here. Now, there's also a dip right here in this. You can see this pocket where it's been dipped in, and I just wanted to get past it as well. It's just out here past the exhaust. So if you look down under here, you can see where I've made all my square lines, and these lines, you can see where the dip is. I wanted to get past that dip that's down in here. So I got a nice flat piece to fold in this area. Come up here if you will, cameraman. Let's look down this way. Let's look straight down on top. You'll see that I've made my lines square where I want to cut this. And so I was able to come back after laying it out on the table. I was able to come back, and you can see that I've made my marks here. And I'll flip it around and go both ways and make sure that I'm transferring this square mark up to my part. That way I know this is folding squarely with this. That way everything's going to stay in place. And I've done that all the way around and found each spot all the way around, marking each location of where we're making our lines. So once you've got all this, once you have all this is transferred up to here and vice versa, and you've got everything locked into place. Now I needed to make my lines down the side where I'm actually going to make my cut, my first cut in this thing. So what I've done, I just took my block of steel here, line it up with my line that I made where I want to make the cut, and then you can come up here when this is lined up and make your mark on your part. And that shows you where, I didn't have it lined up right. Fix that. There we go. Sorry, my eyeballs were looking the other way. I better get that double line off. So, but that's how I made my square line. You can see over here on this side, I've done the same thing, but you'll see that I've already made my wedge line. And here's how I did so. So here we go. Line this up. Let me swap you here, cameraman. So here's how, again, there's my square line. So I know that's one of the cuts that we're going to make. But how do you know how to make this gap? How do you know how to gap that? Well, here's what I did. And there's a million ways you can try this. I think this is a pretty good way because, again, the important thing is that you have these things gapped right, so when these things all bend and go together, that you've got a nice, clean gap to weld up. A lot of guys probably don't, there's a lot of guys that don't have TIG welders. A lot of guys that build hot rods, they're not welders at all. They may have a MIG welder or something like that, but they might not be a great welder. Well, if you're not a great welder, it's very, very important for you to start with a nice, clean butt weld, a nice joint to weld up. It's really important to have that. Otherwise, you're going to end up filling a giant gap I heard a guy say the other night, he said, if you can step across it, I can weld it up. A gap, you know. Well, yes, that's true. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be a strong weld, a strong joint. So you want a strong joint. So these, again, I'm just using a lot of common stuff that people have to make certain that you have a good gap. And the way that I figured out my gap, back over here, sir. The way that I figured out my gap, here's what I did. Let me find my small scale here. Here's how I figured out the gap. I know that this thing needs to drop, that we're trying to drop this about 1 5/8 inches. So I know that. I know that one of these blocks is about 1 5/8 inches. You know, on this particular car, we kind of have a little bit of a loose tolerance on that at 1.5 inches, 1 5/8 inches. It's pretty close to where we need it to be. So these pieces here, of course, are going to go in here. Now, when I drop this down, I'm going to lose 1 5/8 inches. So this is going to be sitting on the table. So I know that this measurement right here, coming up to here at 5 3/4 is where we need the top of this to end up. So since I know this distance, I can move this out of the way, and I want this to come down here, and I want it to be at the 5 3/4 mark. And that's going to drop this about 1.5 inches. So here's what we do. You got your piece of paper here, and you cut this angle in the end of your piece of paper, or you can use a piece of aluminum or whatever if you want to use it over and over again. Make sure you're square here. Get this lined up with your 90 line, the line that we had. Remember, that's the one where we used the block, and make sure we're square with the end of this thing. And then what you're going to do is hold this corner. It's important to keep this corner held with your thumb or something. You could tape up a piece and put a thumbtack through both of them to make a little, hinged piece there. But you're going to pull this down to your 5 3/4 area here, and then look at the end over here. So then once you get this down to where you want it to be, and it helps if you have two people to do stuff like this, you learn how to take caps off Sharpies pretty quickly. And you're going to come in here and make your mark. Now there's your wedge. Of course, remember, that's our double line we messed up there. That's the wedge. If you look down here on this side, you'll see the one I've already marked, and you'll see that it's very, very similar. So since you know that, you can go ahead and cut out a little piece like this that matches your wedge, and you can transfer that all over, because this is going to be the same angle as this. These are going to be the same cuts. So you can come in here with your Sharpie, get this wedge where you want it to be. Now my paper's a little short, so I'll have to continue it off, but you can lay this in here and mark your wedge, and you're going to know where these go. And so everything's going to be moving at the same, with the same gap. Everything's going to be the same gap. Now, I would recommend running I'd recommend cutting this out of a piece of aluminum. I'm using paper because, like I said, I just want people to be able to use common things around that they may have in their garage. Maybe you don't have a sheet of aluminum, or hopefully you got some kind of sheets of metal, because you're probably building floorboards and a couple other pieces for your car. But if you can shear off a piece that's solid, it'll be a little easier for you to use when you're tracing things out here, making these wedges. Again, this is a part where it's nice to have somebody help you hold the paper while you're making your lines. But you're just transferring this same gap all the way around. And I'll show you another thing that you probably want to do once you have these gaps in here. Now this is showing you where, again, it's all the same angle, so it's all going to drop the same way. And you can take this wedge to your back piece as well and know where it goes. And something that's really important when you're doing things like this, if you're cutting up to a radius, always remember that you have to, now see, I've got this messed up already. See what I did? I put the angle on the wrong side. Pretty common mistake, I hear. So, there. Now we got it right. So, another important thing, remember when you're folding parts like this, if you're cutting this down and you're keeping this metal right here, same as over here, if you're keeping this here, you're trying to fold this material through itself. So it's a good idea to take your drill and drill a hole right in this radius where your cut's going to end. Have a nice hole drilled in this area, and that's going to get that tight material down at the bottom corner out of the way. It's going to let you fold this up a lot better. It's also going to help things fold on the line you want it to be folded on. You know, I saw a guy the other day, he took his cutoff wheel and he scribed a line in his metal so it would fold, you know, in that area. And that's not really a proper way to do it. You really don't want to do that. You know, you're just weakening your joint there. You know, I guess you could go ahead and weld it up, but why would you want to do that when you have this perfect piece of material? But if you do it this way, you're going to end up with tighter joints, and you're going to be able to have really nice welds, and it's going to be a really strong part. And again, it's very important to transfer all your stuff. So once you push this thing down, you know if you're off, you know if this is crooked, if this isn't folding quite right, you know if you're off. So you're able to like square it up and get it in the hole that you want it to be in. Now, what I'm probably going to do, I'm probably going to end up drilling a tap in a hole in my table. You have a piece of channel or something, you don't want to tap it, you could just drill a hole through, take a piece of all thread and just tighten up some nuts, and that'll help you squish this thing down so you don't have to build some big fixture up here. This would be an easy way to pull that down. And if it doesn't pull down incredibly easy, then you know, you might want to make sure your cuts are going down far enough into this radius on the edge, or that your holes are drilled far enough down. If they are, this material shouldn't be all that hard to pull down. It really shouldn't take too much. It shouldn't take a lot of heat. You can put a little heat in if you need to. I might just use my little MAP gas torch to do that, because some people don't have, you know, maybe you don't have an oxyacetylene set up at your place. Maybe all you have is some MAP gas. I usually have it sitting around out here, but you can go down to your local hardware store and get some MAP gas, and you can get this hot enough to soften up enough to bend. But it shouldn't take a lot if you got all your cuts right. If your cuts are off-centered, well, when you make these bends, this piece is going to want to twist a little bit. It's good if you're not square. So just slow down. Visual engineering. Think about what you're doing. Look at it. Look at it. Look at it. And then when you make your cuts, you'll be confident. So I'm just using the portaband to try to get a good cut. You can see we're getting a nice clean cut here. I'll get this section removed, and then we'll come back in with the death wheel and clean up these bottom corners and get it lined up. See our angle? All right, so we've got everything bolted down where we need it to be. We've got all of our V-notches cut. They're all, you know, very clean. We just, again, slowing down and think about what you're doing. We've got a lag bolt coming through the table up onto our spacer block here, and we're just going to drop that spacer right back down onto the table. And we removed the 1 5/8" spacer that was here, and that's exactly where we need this to drop down to. So we should be able to just take this ratchet and pull her down, bring this to the table. Well, if it isn't my old buddy Denny Jameson stopping by to say hello. Look at that coupe. There's one thing I know about Denny. If the sun's out and it's a nice day, he's going to find a reason to go take a ride. Another thing I know about Denny is that he's a heck of a fabricator, and if he's around somewhere where people are working on something, it's likely they're going to put a tool in his hand. So he was smart enough to get on back down the driveway. But man, what a beautiful car. That car is just incredible. And I'll tell you what, it runs like a rape tape. All right, so we got everything welded up. We got the fixture off of this thing. It fits perfectly when it's loose, right in my scribe lines that we made when it was stock. So we know the width is perfect. We know the height is perfect. When we took the fixture off, it didn't move a bit. It stayed exactly where we wanted it to be. It's still there. It's still in the perfect location. So we got everything welded up. We actually welded up inside and out because we're going to clean up some of the welds on the outside, and I like to leave some weld on it. So right in this area here, we didn't get it on video, but there was just this was sitting down just a little bit lower, so we had to open that up to get it flush. And you can see my sand marks here where I took out some of the imperfection as far as like where it's just a tiny bit. It really wasn't much at all. But we got everything welded up. Everything's nice and smooth, straight. Like I said, we got everything welded up on the inside as well. And our drop is exactly where we wanted it to be. Bear with me just a moment. Had to grab scale. So everything is exactly where we want it to be. We needed this to be at 3.5. And we are right on it. So super happy with this. It's ready to go in the chassis. And you know, and here's one of the biggest fears. When you're dropping a rear cross member, you need this hole. This needs to be in the exact stock position with these 3 holes out on the side. Otherwise, you're going to have to slide this thing down your frame, and that's going to move your wheelbase. That's going to put your wheel in a different place in the rear. So if you heat this up and you try to bend it and it swings out or it swings in, because this is all triangulated stock, this thing has a pretty heavy triangulation there. So if you just push on this, it's going to swing this center section out or in, more likely out, which, you know, can move then you can't use your stock drive shaft. Your torque tube, you can't use that because the distance is going to be different in your rear end, and it's going, like I said, it's going to move your wheel. So it's really important to take your time, fixture all this stuff up, and get it in the right position. All this marking, all this measurement, all the layout on this, the prep for this, that's where the time really was getting this all laid out and taking the time to make our models and figure out where to make our V-cuts so that we had nice precision cuts. So when you go back to weld this stuff up, you don't have a bunch of, pigeon poop weld all over it. You get some nice tight welds and it looks nice and clean, and that's what you want. So not just nice and clean, you want it strong. And that's what we've got. And I'm gonna let Brian clean up his welds on this thing, and it's ready to go in the car. Well, that about wraps it up for dropping this rear cross member. It dropped right into the frame. We had to ream one little hole to get all the rivets to go into place. That cross member did not come out of the frame that we were putting it in. And so that tells you like how good the Ford factory was about lining up those holes. You know, those were 2 completely different parts. They were born separate, and they all went in that good. And it also tells you this. It tells you that the time that we took to lay out all of our work before we started chopping on it and dropping it, that all that time was well spent because it all worked out great in the end. Now, it's not Tuesday night, and I'm not going to my buddy Denny's for Hot Rod Night because it's Wednesday night, and we're going over to the Johnson County Fairgrounds here in Indiana to help our buddy Scott Willis that puts on the Hoosier Vintage Wheel Swap Meet. We're going to go over there and help him get set up. My buddy Greg has made up some pork belly and some other goodies for us, so we're going to head over there. And you know I like to eat, so I'm out of here right now, but you better find yourself over at the Hoosier Vintage Wheel Swap Meet this weekend. It's going to be incredible. September 19th and 20th. If you're watching this and it's a new video, you probably ought to get in your car and head that way right now, because it's probably going on. It's probably going on right now, but it's a great meet. It's in central Indiana. There's tons of hot rodders here. We're the racing capital of the world, so there's tons of race car parts here. It's a great meet. I have found incredible gems over there, and so will you. I'll see you over there.